Now give the floor to the Honourable Lynda Tabuya. You have the floor, ma'am.
Good morning, Honourable Speaker, the Honourable Prime Minister, the Leader of Opposition, the Honourable Ministers, and my colleagues, Members of Parliament. I rise, Mr. Speaker, to respond to the 2019 and 2020 budget. But before I do so, I just wish to respond to the Honourable Delay and just remind him, if he has forgotten history, that in 1987, that his leader, the current Prime Minister, was our leader's boy as the Navy commander, and he supported the 1987 coup. And also, but the 87 coup is long and gone. And the Honourable Rambuka, our leader, has redeemed himself when he negotiated with the leaders of other races in this country, which resulted in the 97 Constitution, where everyone's interest was protected, was multiracial, and claimed internationally as one of the best constitutions in the world. So, and the sugar industry under our honourable leader was a boom, but now it's become a doom under their leader, 2006 coup leader. So stop ridiculing the honourable leader of opposition. Now, Mr. Speaker, I humbly stand before this esteemed House, not just as an individual, but as the voice of a nation in pain. A nation whose workers are hurting from deep economic wounds. A nation whose anger is real and whose concerns demand the undivided attention of its leaders and not its ridicule. Now, this morning, Mr. Speaker, I will attempt to give voice of their concerns and pray that I do so not in the spirit of finding fault, but rather in the hope that together we may honestly identify the problems and find solutions to what will be a painful period of transition and adjustments. Now, in my presentation, I will attempt to highlight now how I believe this budget is crippling our economy and increasing poverty amongst half our population in terms of my shadow portfolio, which is housing, and also local government. Now, I will conclude by offering some possible solutions that hopefully the government will take into account. Now, in this current budget, which is lauded as the Bainimarama boom, modeled after Singapore. Now, yesterday, the honourable members of opposition, including myself, have vividly illustrated our thoughts via our display of these brightly coloured packets, which is boom. Now, Mr. Speaker, I have consistently called out the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be, because the citizens of Fiji deserve nothing more than the truth. And the truth is, the liquidity problem that I've been highlighting is only a symptom of the big problem. There is a problem, now whether the government admits it or not. Now, the big banks should have come out and admitted it officially, but they haven't. Now, for fear of being victimized. However, the facts remain. To support my position first espoused in February this year, and it still remains my position. And all these facts can simply be gathered by talking to people, which I have, who are in the know, including bankers, off the record, bank customers, myself included, businesses, lawyers, real estate agents, but not from a bunch of Fiji First Yes people. Now, the facts are these. The interest rates have gone up. Interest rates have gone up, aggressive term deposit drives by the banks to raise cash, loan settlements have been postponed in some cases without definitive new settlement dates, no new loans to staff, and huge reductions in approved new loans to customers. Now, the Honourable Prime Minister is not here. Yes, I admit, I'm not an economist, but neither is he, and neither is his Minister for Economy. But it really doesn't take rocket science, it doesn't. And it doesn't take someone with an economics degree to see what's going on. Just talk to people on the ground, the stakeholders, the public who've messaged me directly, and you shall discover the truth. Mr. Speaker, the truth is, this is an austerity budget. An austerity budget is defined as a budget with policies that aim to reduce government budget deficits through spending cuts, tax increases, or a combination of both. Now, austerity measures are used by governments around the world when they find it difficult to pay their bills or their debts. Now, our government is finding it increasingly difficult to operate and deliver on its promises, with $1 billion less than expected in its budget to pay its $4.8 billion in debt. Now, it's desperately trying to cut costs ahead of payments to our foreign and domestic lenders, debts that have repayments due within the budget cycle. Now, it appears that in our haste to develop a Singapore-like economy and borrowing billions of dollars to pour into our roads and infrastructure, we have run out of options. The sad reality is that this austerity budget is not a fiscally responsible choice, but a necessary and painful path we must now face as a nation. The truth is, Mr. Speaker, our country and our economy is barely keeping itself above water. The vast majority of our citizens are struggling. We've all seen the increased aggressiveness in which the LTA imposes traffic and e-ticketing fines, even to the extent of punishing honesty and compassion in the occasional situation where people need to get home, our people need to get home, and they don't top up, so they offer cash. And then we have the bus driver who shows compassion to the passenger, who travels every day in this same bus, who says, I'll help you get home. But we're punishing them with huge fines. Our people. Yes, a law that you imposed. Or how FERCA has aggressively tried to squeeze more taxes out of individuals and small to medium businesses, incentivizing FERCA staff with commissions. They will make the more that they collect, the more commissions they make. So, constantly auditing business and individuals who themselves are struggling to pay bills or obtain new loans from banks. The laying off of thousands of workers, like my brothers and sisters in WAF, due to budget cutbacks and thousands more on temporary contracts, constantly worrying if this week will be their last on the job. The 50-cent plastic bag levies and exorbitant e-cal taxes, these are part of the structural adjustments that are synonymous with an austerity budget. Now, in theory, austerity budgets are praised as being fiscally responsible, but this is far from being economical with the truth. Now, the studies by world-renowned scholars like Noam Chomsky have shown that austerity budgets are often used by dictatorial regimes. Developing countries in Europe, most notably Greece, had austerity budgets and structural adjustments forced on them. I say that again, developing countries in Europe, most notably Greece, had austerity budgets and structural adjustments forced on them by the IMF, only to end up with high unemployment, high suicide rates, and rampant drug use. Is this a trend that sounds frighteningly familiar? The Honourable Minister for Economy controls 61% of our entire national budget. Expenditure through a requisition system, where each ministry has to reapply for funds. Now, a very simple analogy is that the minister is like a father who promises his children $10 spending money to each, but instead of getting the full $10, the child gets $4, and if they want the remaining $6, they need to make their case to their father, and it is entirely his decision whether to give that $6 or not. Now, what we see from the budget trends in the last sitting to now is that the $4 used by the children, or the budget given to the ministers, was only enough to cover operating expenses, and that the remaining $6, or the remaining that's under R, make up funding the ministerial programs that were never paid out in full. Now, this 61% of the 2019-2020 budget estimates will need approval from the Minister for Economy and will encompass pretty much most of the 2018 election promises. Now, in the past budgets, these requisitions allocations never been fully spent or approved by the Minister for Economy. So, here you have ministries given just enough funds to operate, but without the full funds to really make any meaningful difference in the lives of our citizens. What good is a ministry that is fully operational but doesn't have the financial means completely or the tools to help its people? How frustrating it must be for our ministers. Good people good people on the other side of the aisle, as competent as they may be, do not have the autonomy to deliver much-needed services to our people. How disempowering it must be to have a boss that is nothing less than a control freak, who micromanages and does not trust his own team with freedom. This really must deplete morale. It must be reduce confidence and added stress. Now, Mr. Speaker, please allow me to now shed light on this austerity budget impacting this nation in the area of housing. Now, the right to adequate housing is not only a basic human right, but is a right protected by our Constitution. It's the responsibility of the state to take reasonable steps in ensuring that every person can gain access to adequate housing and sanitation. And of course, our Constitution further elaborates that if the state cannot provide accessible and adequate housing, then it must prove it can't do so. Now, this is pertinent given the requisition requirements mandated by the Minister for Economy and the type of scrutiny which we will require later in Supply Committee hearings. And the United Nations also defines accessible and adequate housing. It's more than just four walls and a roof. It's the right of every woman, man, youth, and child to gain and sustain a safe and secure home and community in which to live in peace and dignity. Now, ignoring this fundamental human right, Mr. Speaker, will only lead to increased social problems, which we now see every day: homelessness, job loss, poverty, hunger, social isolation, inequality, and drug abuse. Now, while there are several groups of people in Fiji with inadequate housing, including homelessness and street dwellers, by far the largest number of our citizens, about 80,000 in total, live in squatters and informal settlements. Often they are seen on the seaside highways and mangroves. They also exist on road reserves and state foreshore land. Now, a troubling aspect of squatter settlements is inadequate access to sanitation, with most of the human waste discharged directly into the sea or via pit toilets. Now, sadly, the Environment Department, which the Minister for Environment should note, has pretty much turned a blind eye on this form of environmental degradation by improper sanitation, by spending most of the resources going after bigger companies, or maybe playing chase-up to the highly exposed projects like Freeso, who are able to perhaps afford to comply to industry standards, but not focusing. Why aren't they focusing on the nearly 10% of our population living in squatter and informal settlements, where lack of sanitary conditions, human waste, and lack of rubbish collection contributes to our environmental problems in a far more significant way? So, what is the solution to the housing issue in Fiji? Now, if our economic model is Singapore, then our solution is to aggressively expand housing development through our housing authority, just as Singapore has successfully done. To fully realize the Singapore housing model of supplying adequate housing, all economic factors must be taken into consideration. Now, the first hurdle to supplying adequate housing is inadequate availability of land. The solution is for government directly purchase or lease land from landowner units to supply more land to the market. It then must allow entities such as the Housing Authority and incentivize private developers to scale up land development at a much faster pace. Housing Authority delivers no more than approximately 1,500 land lots per year. At this rate, it'll take over 50 years before they can develop enough land for the nearly 80,000 people in squatters and informal settlements. And this doesn't account for any growth in population or building houses on the land, which is an even larger problem. The second hurdle, inadequate development approval framework. Government permits take way too long or are too tedious to obtain. Files go through too many different departments, too many different desks, and frequently lost or misplaced. We recognize the government's recently announced new initiative to streamline the building permit, but this process just isn't enough. Part of the solution lies in outsourcing to private certifiers who act as agents for the planning authorities to assist with processing and speeding up the backlog of applications, reducing or eliminating lost files and duplicated resources. They would be generally compensated based on productivity. We have more than an adequate supply of labor, Mr. Speaker, both local and also overseas, together with capital and the level of entrepreneurship via savvy developers in Fiji, to ensure our housing solutions are met. This comes with a caveat, of course, that the laws and tax incentives are applied consistently and expeditiously, and risk profiles are acceptable. Now, part of our current challenge is that land and house packages are just too expensive and unaffordable for most of our citizens. Housing Authority targets developed serviced land lots for approximately $40,000. Now, a small two-bedroom home built to code today costs approximately $80,000, bringing the total cost of a land and house package to about $120,000. Too expensive for the vast majority of Fijians who live in these settlements. Now, our solution, which I propose after speaking to the stakeholders, we must design and build medium to high density housing versus just individual land lots on a massive commercial scale, just like Singapore, to help bring down land and development costs, infrastructure costs, and construction costs, which can come about from economies of scale, newer building methodologies and technology. This will help generate savings of approximately about 20%, bringing down the total land and home cost to about $100,000. Number two, government must take its constitutionally mandated role to provide adequate and affordable housing for 80,000 of our poorest people seriously by making a commitment to put all of these people into housing over the next 10 years. For example, a dollar for dollar, one-for-one investment program. Every dollar that a person gives, the government gives a dollar. So the government invests $50,000 per home via a subsidy if the prospective homeowner also commits to $50,000 for the long-term investment. Number three, how much will this cost government? $80,000 people equates to approximately about 20,000 homes if you give an average of 4 people in a home. 20,000 homes times $100,000, okay, $2 billion, but government's commitment would be only 50% or $1 billion. Now, if this program is rolled out over 10 years, then this will cost government about $100 million a year, or only approximately 2.5% of the current budget. This is very easily achievable by reprioritizing line items within the current budget, such as maybe diverting the ECAL proceeds. Which is more important, climate change initiatives or putting our poorest people into adequate and affordable housing? If we got really smart, if we got really smart, we might even able to design green homes and apartment buildings that qualify for green or climate change funding from international markets, which is becoming more readily available. Thus, you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Number 4, how much will this cost each family? $50,000 over a 20-year loan at a concessionary interest rate of, say, 2.5% will cost a family approximately $60 a week, or $1.36 an hour if you're working full-time, which approximately 34% of a person's wage if they are earning $4 an hour. Again, very achievable. Now, home ownership for all, even those in informal settlements, is a very achievable goal. It's a very exciting goal. Why can't we see it? Why can't they see it? Why aren't we doing it? Because it isn't a priority. Government is sleeping at the wheel with respect to housing. Time to wake up and get serious about fixing our most significant problems instead of just talking about it and offering band-aid solutions. Now, to conclude, Mr. Speaker, the painful transitions and structural adjustments brought about by this austerity budget will mean a painful journey ahead, which is why I cannot support this budget in its current form. But this is not the end. This isn't the end, nor is it a journey that only the Honourable Minister of the Economy, Minister, or the government need to take alone. Just as the government belongs to all of us, so too must the challenges we face. This is not your problem. This is our problem to fix. It is a lesson in humility for the government to come clean and admit, okay, you failed our people. $1 billion less this year in service delivery to our people, a quarter of the budget. To accomplish this, we need more dialogue, consensus building among stakeholders, because although we may live on one, no man is an island. looking at the challenges and solutions we face in trying to build more adequate, affordable homes that are climate resilient, environmentally conscious, and well planned through properly elected local councils in Fiji, I have realized that a happy home is first built on a foundation of love. Now, we can keep criticizing each other. My Bible is bigger than your Bible, removing the motes and beams from each other's eyes, an eye for an eye, but really, what is the universal value, Honorable Speaker, that binds us all? It's love. Love for our people than ourselves. Service to our people to the best of our abilities, to deliver the best services to our people that puts our people first and realizes the dreams and aspirations of our people in the first 3 words of this Constitution, we the people. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.